Hello, everyone. I'm Sergio Perez with Newmark. You are on the first commercial real estate podcast for Mexico. And we have a very important guest today. He's the Senior VP of Operations and Industrial Logistics for Newmark. So he has a very, very unique perspective of what's going on the global arena. On industrial specifically, he has become a very good friend of mine. He works with one of my best and most relevant friends in the industry, which is Jack Fraker. And I want to take advantage of this time to have his expertise poured to the podcast. It's my first one in English, so please bear with me and be patient because I'm not a native speaker. And even though Matt speaks Spanish, I want to keep him comfortable doing this in English. Welcome, Matt. Great to have you here.
Muchísimas gracias, Sergio, amigo. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Perfect, Matt. Let's get started giving some perspective to the audience with telling them a little bit about you. Who's Matt?
So I am the Senior VP of Operations. I look after industrial and logistics here at Newmark. As you mentioned, I work closely with Jack Fraker to make sure we're capturing the right opportunities. It gets into the nitty-gritty of revenue tracking and but there are some really important initiatives around recruiting. If you think of the company as sort of a machine, we are making sure it's well-oiled and things are running smoothly, but it's also kind of building and adding certain parts here and there to bulk up the machine, make sure it's operating as effectively and efficiently as possible.
Being the company with the fastest growth in the history of commercial real estate consulting, it's a huge challenge, and we're going to go through that. But the expansion challenges that we have as a company, and specifically on the industrial arena, are huge, and we're going to dive into that. But first, what did you do before? What's your track record, Matt?
So prior to joining Newmark, I was with CBRE for about 9 years. JLL before that. I was on the research side and kind of touched on consulting. So I started off doing, data, market reports, and then more recently, I ran the logistics platform at CBRE Investment Management. So a lot of forecasting, partnering with, developers and investors to forecast certain markets in the US and North America. So I kind of pivoted into a different function, different role within the industry. I love industrial. I did do office for a little bit, and I find industrial incredibly dynamic, and it's really what runs the world in terms of the economic output. And a warehouse building might seem boring, but I find it fascinating. And if you tour a fulfillment center, million square feet and above, it's a really incredible experience.
Given your history and track record, I think you've had at least regional, and I'm talking about North America, perspective of the market's performance for how long? And now global, obviously, for the last few years. For how long do you think? Yeah.
So, we are growing globally for sure. We're focused on North America. We have offices, all over the U.S., major markets. We're growing in certain gateway markets like Atlanta, Central and South Florida. And we absolutely love Mexico. We have 35 plus folks on the industrial side there. You could speak to it better than I could, but our goal is to be more integrated, despite everything happening on the global stage. Politics aside, we we are very enthusiastic about growing our global footprint and partnering more with our colleagues in Canada, Mexico, UK, Europe, and beyond.
What to be a little bit more specific in because we have obviously all Latin America coverage, all North America coverage. What's your coverage in Europe specifically right now, Matt?
So London for sure, Birmingham, and then we're growing in Germany, France, and Poland at the moment.
Perfect. And again, that would give us a pretty good visibility of what's moving. And on top of that, on the capital markets discussion, which is part of the industrial play, we have global perspective as the public might imagine, because we pour money with Jack from every latitude in the globe to all the different markets, including Mexico, substantially. What are right now, Matt, the main initiatives that the industrial group has on Newmark?
Well, we have several. Number one is we are differentiating ourselves by specialization. So we have a resource group model where we're really honing in on subsectors like cold storage, iOS, manufacturing, surplus properties. That's just a start. And so we have.
And we are, allow me the interruption, we are super strong on data centers consulting as well, right?
Correct. And we are definitely strong on the data center front, and there is a lot of overlap there with industrial for sure.
There's nothing clear on data centers right now, neither on AI, but it's a clear, I think it's closer to industrial than to other type of assets, right?
Well, it's interesting because previously it was all about industrial and retail with the omni-channel, and there's still a lot of overlap there with regard to e-commerce and whatnot. But in terms of data center land sites, it's all about power, and then there's a lot of competition for well located and sites that have the power, and so it's interesting because there's a bit of push and pull with industrial and data centers, but to be clear, it is no longer a subsector of industrial. It is its own asset class, and it is definitely on fire. But industrial is still the darling of real estate, and although things are a little wonky right now with regard to interest rates and geopolitical environment, there's still a ton of interest in industrial, and quite a few investors, expanding occupiers are optimizing their supply chains, even though there's less net absorption. So a few more move-outs than move-ins. There's still a lot of leasing activity and a lot of new leasing activity. And we have the largest amount of leases rolling over the next 2 years. So we're expecting to see even more activity, into 2026, 27.
And before we move into the performance of some of the main markets, how does the platform help clients? What type of clients, in order to add value to their operations, Matt, and to their decisions, actually?
So how does Newmark help clients?
Yes.
Well, we have, as I said, it's multifunctional. So you mentioned on the capital market side, we have very strong teams in Texas, on the Northeast, Mexico, on the West Coast that are really partnering with capital, with investors, and advising them. And there are disposition opportunities, there's acquisition opportunities, and Newmark helps with all of that. And then on the occupier side, we have very strong teams that are helping corporate occupiers, companies that are looking at their real estate footprint and they're questioning, do we stay put? Do we consolidate? Do we downsize? Do we bring operations back home? Do we put a site in Mexico? All these really important questions that do take time to play out. So our advisors partner with companies, with the real estate departments in these companies to really help them plan effectively with regard to their real estate footprint. It is perhaps a small portion of the logistics spend if you look at things like CapEx equipment, labor, transportation. The real estate cost is something like 5%. And so, it might be overlooked, but it's still an incredibly important aspect where they're located. And so oftentimes they contract that out. And so our Newmark experts are really helping the clients plan effectively and make sure they're in the right markets at the right time.
And just taking on your comment, and obviously it's part of what we do. I just ask you for the benefit of the audience.
Explain it better than I could.
Not at all, but yeah, we do some of this stuff, and right now, as you know, a site selection decision, has to take into consideration several major aspects, and real estate is not the main driver, but all the aspects that go around, like labor, cost of logistics, security, you name it, utilities now, are super relevant. And again, I think talking about the international game, I think it's one of the most relevant services that we provide as site selection consultants to help companies take their best decisions. And we as Newmark, we have helped, and specifically my team, we have helped many of the main companies in the region to settle down. But it's funny, as you said, that the real estate part of that is not that big, right? I mean, the real estate part of the decision is not that big. It's really all the other aspects that are the main drivers for those decisions. And if we go, for example, to the capital markets game, it's similar, even though the real estate component might be bigger. If it's a stabilized portfolio for sale, as an example, it's bigger, but it's a capital markets decision, by all means. And if it's a development game, it's pretty similar. So we go like around to do some, to do deeper stuff on related businesses, if I might call, that become our specialty.
Absolutely. Agree 100%. And, I think there's a lot of overlap too. And you had asked about initiatives that we're working on. Another thing that we're focusing on is building up our agency leasing footprint, because that has implications, and overlap with the capital market side. So we're focused on markets like Atlanta and Chicago to build up the agency leasing presence, to make sure we're servicing the clients, and then should there be an opportunity on the capital market side, we will have an advisor, a capital markets focused person that can handle that transaction as well, and then kind of vice versa.
And they go hand to hand.
Absolutely.
Following in that trend, what would be your opinion of the current situation of the real estate market in the U.S.? Obviously, we know about the whole geopolitical discussion that has, as a fact, slowed down the activity globally. And we on on which we are pretty optimistic as Mexico, but that's a whole different discussion. What's the current state of the U.S. industrial market, Matt?
Well, there are pluses and minuses. It was the first quarter in about a decade where net absorption turned negative. Now, it was very slight. If you look at it in terms of the big picture, it was essentially flat. But there were more move-outs than move-ins. But as I said before, leasing activity is still quite strong. But it's not all expansions, right? Occupiers might be downsizing or consolidating. Rents are stable right now. They're not growing as much, as rapidly as they are in Mexico. I think that's one of the main differences between the markets in the US and Mexico, because vacancy is a lot lower, more than half in Mexico than it is in the US. Vacancy has ticked up to 7.4% in the US. And we're expecting that to maybe continue inching up a little more for the remainder of the year. Obviously, it depends a lot on interest rates, and companies are, as I said, they're analyzing their real estate footprint and they're making decisions on their supply chains. We're expecting things to pick back up. We're already almost at the end of the year, but into 2026, 27. So we're kind of in a dip right now. On the supply side, we're seeing less new development. During COVID and shortly after, it was like gangbusters and everyone wanted to get into the market. Interest rates were at historic lows and lots of deals were getting done, and the market got inflated, right? And so we're still kind of burning off a lot of that supply. But all that said, we're bullish on the market. I mean, we have to be, right, but if you look at it from an objective point of view, industrial real estate is still solid in the US and in Mexico, and regardless of where things go in terms of geopolitics, decisions are starting to get done again. I think, April time, things kind of paused given the tariff situation, and there's still a lot of uncertainty, but it seems as though that is subsiding and players are moving forward with decisions.
I think this is super relevant, and I always love to bring perspective to the audience, because in Mexico we complain a lot, and we think that we're in the worst position in the globe, and we're in a pretty good position, and not right now, for the last many years. And just taking some of your comments as a reference, and I'm pretty sure you discussed this with my team on your last visit. But the Mexican absorption, and this is something that the audience can check on the podcast that I did with Eric Brunet, my partner, about the Mexican absorption. We had, for the first 6 months of this year, a drop on absorption in comparison to last year of just 4%, which was the historical highest ever. So where Mexico is still getting a lot of absorption. And as vacancy, even though it grew a bit to close to a 4%, we're still at half of the absorption of the US. So Mexico, if I can put it in a very, black and white perspective based on absorption numbers, we are in pretty good shape right now. The market, even with what we see on decision making on a kind of a frozen market, and we don't see this to be cleared out till the next, I think, 60-ish days happen to see where the tariffs are going to end up. We're still in pretty good shape, and the US is more frozen, if I might call it that way, than Mexico right now. So we are still, with all these discussions and geopolitical arguments, we're still moving as a region. That's my conclusion. I mean, Mexico is still super important for the US. The US is obviously key for Mexican performance. And companies are just waiting to see what's going to happen in order to start deciding where are they going to settle their operations. And again, this is very relevant because people think that we are in Mexico in very bad shape, and it's actually the opposite, no?
Right. If you look at the Texas markets, they are on fire right now. They continue to grow and show strong performance, and that benefits the border markets in Mexico as well. There's a lot of activity happening on the border, and so I think Mexico is doing well, not at the expense of the US or vice versa. I think there's a lot of opportunities for performance to take place on both sides of the border.
And it's companies that are playing in both grounds.
Absolutely.
No? It's funny how Texas has performed. I mean, the performance numbers of Texas have been closer to the Mexican numbers than to the U.S. numbers for the last several years. We are so linked together.
Absolutely. It is interesting given the fact that you're neighbors and it all used to be one land, right? And so it could be, I don't know if you could explain it from a cultural standpoint or what, but Mexico or Texas continues to top the charts in terms of rent growth and net absorption and really strong demand.
Yeah. Now, going a bit higher, Matt, what are the factors that you see globally that are shaping the industrial arena, as far as real estate, obviously?
That's a great question. I think global trade has a really integral part of what's going on in terms of markets in the US and the UK and elsewhere. I think you can't escape the geopolitical environment, but I think it really drills down to the consumer. And the past decade, we've talked a lot about e-commerce and how much it drives demand for real estate. I think I've heard a stat that was like, for every 1 billion in e-commerce sales, it generates 1.2 million square feet of net absorption in the US. And although it might not be as much elsewhere around the world, e-commerce is still really driving market activity and demand for space. And in addition to that, I think you're seeing companies really take a look at where their operations are and where they need to be. And it's all about cost and just making sure that they are able to reach their customers the most effective way possible. And so I think, I mean, things are definitely weird in terms of the geopolitical environment, and to a certain extent, it seems like there are growing divisions, but that's politics, right? I think if you look at business activity, you put that aside, and it's all about just running your business effectively and making sure you're meeting the needs of your customers. And I think Newmark is such a big part of that, helping companies achieve that in the most effective way possible.
So you mentioned e-commerce, and obviously e-commerce, in my perspective, it's more related to the domestic market than to an international game, even though many of the products that are sold are imported, which is part of a different game. But they are more a B2C play, right? What would be other industries, Matt, that you see as driving demand right now on the industrial play?
Manufacturing is number one. That is one of the most active subsectors and will continue to be. Others include automotive, food and beverage is really active. So cold storage or buildings along the cold chain. And to an extent retail as well, but that somewhat volatile, depends on the strength of the consumer. But I would say definitely manufacturing, automotive, cold chain.
With this in mind, Matt, what type of buildings are the ones that have the highest demand right now? What type of space do these industries require? And again, I'm keeping out the data center discussion because we are considering it as a different asset class, because you cannot put a data center on a manufacturing plant or on a warehousing building, right? But keeping data centers aside, which again are like a huge investment, but on a very specific small building. No, it's a different game. What type, given these industries, what type of buildings are the ones that are with the highest demand right now?
Definitely a flight to quality. So modern Class A product is being chased. So buildings that have been constructed in the past 5 to 7 years or so, we're seeing a new development. The 700,000 square foot and above size segment. I think it's something like 75% is pre-leased versus 40% in the 50,000 and below segment. Wow. And so, we're definitely seeing demand for big box. A lot of that's warehouses, but manufacturing, there are a lot of specific requirements for because these buildings are operationally heavy. Cold storage, for example, it's essentially a box within a box, and incredibly customized, bespoke to the user. So, buildings need to be modern and efficient, and so that's what I would say. That is what is demanded, and kind of that functionally obsolescent product is definitely not in demand. So it does propose some opportunities for redevelopment down the line.
Perfect. Are there any cities that might come up to your mind internationally, obviously probably in the US, that have like an outstanding performance? In Mexico, for example, the Mexico City market just does not care about what's going on the economy. The demand is huge. The rental rate increase is historical. The vacancy is hyper low. And I mean, this market just doesn't care. Are there any other example like that? And obviously the drivers for these markets are mainly based on consumer demand, right? Because it's a not even a last mile, but it's a distribution game, right? Are there any cities similar in the U.S. to Mexico City?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there, Sergio. It's really driven by population size and population growth. And so if you look at the markets in the U.S., I mentioned Dallas. It's one of the fastest growing population centers, and with a net absorption of 14 million square feet year to date in 2025. But then you've got Phoenix is another market that is performing very well. And then, you've got Kansas City, which, might not be on folks' radar, but that is a very strong distribution industrial market. But then you have some smaller markets that are performing well, like Greenville, South Carolina, Raleigh, Durham, Savannah, Georgia. And so, on the operations side, we're looking at those markets as nodes of opportunity. And so we're recruiting heavily in those metro areas and, talking to talent there and making sure, we have boots on the ground in those markets. Columbus is another one. And then, some other usual suspects like Inland Empire, which is a massive market. And Houston is another Texas market. So, if you look at regionally, the Southeast markets in the US are performing the best, and that's where you see the most population growth.
Right, right. Very interesting. Now, jumping to capital markets, Matt, how's capital viewing the industrial, real estate regionally? Talking about the US and Mexico.
So, we're having a lot of calls, a lot of catch-ups with investors who it appears that they're getting more specific, maybe more picky. I don't know if that's the technical word. More analytical. As I mentioned during COVID, interest rates super low, and it was, the deals were flowing. Now things have calmed down, and capital markets has eased a bit, but if you look at sales volume, I believe it was up in Q2 in terms of industrial sales. But investors are still bullish on industrial. And although a lot of focus is on data centers, they're also looking at that bulk product, and also last mile is always popular because rents tend to grow in that segment the most. And so, we're talking to our investor clients and advising them and on fundamentals and making sure they, are up to speed on activity in these certain markets and helping them navigate, because they're kind of up here, right? And they have a higher level purview, and so we're helping them see what's going on the ground. So, to sum it up, I think they are, like I said, they're still bullish on industrial, but they're asking a lot of questions and making sure, they're dotting their I's, crossing their T's. We're expecting deal activity to pick up in 2026, but obviously it hinges on interest rates. And even though we are expecting perhaps one rate cut this year, it's already kind of been baked in. And so I think it really depends on where interest rates go for what investors decide going forward.
Which somehow it's affected by the whole geopolitical discussion. Now, taking your last comment, what's your outlook for the next, I don't know, 12 months of the industrial logistics real estate business for North America, for the region, Matt?
Well, as I said, I think things are going to pick up. Usually Q4 is the strongest. We are seeing lots of activity. If you look at our deal consideration, we, more than doubled our deal activity in terms of Newmark deals, comparing the first half of this year to the first half of last year. So, we're expecting activity to continue for the remainder of this year, and for things to start to accelerate more into 2026.
Perfect. And how do you see the midterm, let's say 3 years?
Well, It depends on a lot
And
of,
I don't know.
I mean, you don't have the crystal ball, neither do I, but what's your thought?
assuming things return to somewhat of a normal environment, which who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. Um, I think we're not gonna see interest rate go back down to 3% or I'm sorry, vacancy back down to 3% or cap rates at 2.5%, but we're gonna see more of a normalization in the industrial sector and in the real estate market where supply is more in tune with demand. So I would submit that we're going to see kind of more of a balancing out of fundamentals
Do you see,
over
Matt,
that medium term.
yeah, following on your comment, do you see the, I cannot say the end, but a reduction of globalization and more regionalization on the long trend
I think
globally?
that's an important question. It seems as though we're heading in that direction. So, we may see more concentration of activity. We may see um, more consolidations happening as a result. But you can't unravel a global economy. I mean, you could try. It would take decades. So I think things are going to be intertwined for the medium to long term. But to your point, I think, yes, we will see more regionalization.
And I think there's no way back on that one. No, it's something that again started a few years ago, and it's just getting momentum right now with a big geopolitical push. Now, we've talked, Matt, about a bit, about e-commerce, about data centers and so on. What would be one of the main trends that you see that people is not considering as relevant, that you see as being very important on what's going to happen on industrial real estate?
So this response might seem kind of out there, but I would say 3D printing has been overlooked. And the reason is, if you look at how goods are being made, manufactured, created, it really depends on, manufacturing it and then storing it within proximity. But if goods are being manufactured and then distributed same day or next day, that could pose an interesting challenge to the distribution hubs. So I don't think we're anywhere near there, but that is something that I think about often because 3D printing is really becoming more popular. I think automation as well, with regard to trucking and the robotics as well. So I just think rapid increases or technological advances are going to really impact our sector more than we could even fathom.
And it's it's a big deal because 3D printing might change the whole manufacturing processes for several simple product manufacturing that can change the main manufacturing plant to having close to a not a last mile but closer to the final market, a smaller manufacturing operation. It's a totally different perspective on manufacturing that I agree with you nobody's considering, and it's going to come fast.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. Now, what would be, Matt, your advice, giving your career, giving your perspective on hiring top talent throughout the globe? What would be the recommendation for the young audience that we have here on the podcast. This podcast, one of the targets, it's been a tool for knowledge for young people because there's not much on commercial real estate in Mexico. What would be your advice for young people that gets into the industry and how to become relevant, how to become an opinion leader, how to make a change in the industry? We have had the chance to interview, very high performing and historical people in Mexico that have been, a basic ingredient to make it one of the most evolved commercial markets in the globe. What would be your advice to that people, to the young people that is getting into the industry?
One word: patience.
Which in this generation is like super hard to get, right?
It's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for a lot of people, but it's a requirement if you want to have a career, have a long-lasting position and thrive in this industry. I didn't mention at the beginning, but I sort of fell into commercial real estate. I didn't even know what it was. I was going to grad school for urban planning and policy. I had a colleague who started working for a CRE firm, and he plugged me in. I think networking is by far the most important thing you could do. Do it now, do it early. And you never know when a colleague or an old friend might come along and present a good opportunity. That is how I'm here at Newmark, in fact. So I would say networking is number one, face-to-face communication. The younger generations, they're digital natives. So although they don't do face-to-face as much, but they have larger networks. So they do really well online, but still in this industry, deals get done face-to-face, and the real magic happens when you're in the same room as the other individual. So to the extent that you can physically do that, definitely go get a coffee with someone. And also vulnerability is important. You're not going to know everything off the bat. It takes time to learn these concepts, and it kind of builds and compounds. And so, and that's where the patience comes in handy. But reaching out to an industry expert, asking for mentorship, not taking a lot of their time, but hey, can we grab a coffee for 30 minutes? I would really love to pick your brain about XYZ. And then also like jumping into challenging projects. You don't learn doing easy stuff, right? You need to be challenged. You need to fail. You need to fall down in order to get stronger, to learn. And that has worked for me. That's worked for many others. And so that's what I would say to the younger professionals that want to have a long career, want to get into this business, and it's a tough business. Let's be honest. Sergio, and it's not for the faint of heart. So you got to have tough skin, but you need to be open and willing to learn and grow.
And it pays back. You see it, but you always get the benefit out of it. Matt, thank you very much for the time. We had a 30,000 feet perspective on everything on this one, but I will invite you in the future to talk about AI that we skipped, and it's something that is becoming super relevant in all lines of the human life, and the new trends as far as the type of real estate that's coming, to go deeper on that and so on. But thank you very much for being with us, Matt. You're going to be a regular in this program. Hopefully my English wasn't that bad, but anyways, we're going to translate for the audience. Thank you very much, Matt, for the time, and we're looking forward to having you again on the show.
Thank you, amigo. And your English is perfecto.
Gracias, Matt. Abrazo.
Okay.